good morning. This is going to be our show before the elections, and today I'm joined by Caitlin Moon. Caitlin has just graduated from Georgetown University last spring, and she's currently working on Capitol Hill. Caitlin, it's good to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're going to get into discussing the elections and where we stand. I'm not sure, did you have a chance to see the Trump rally in Pennsylvania where he was talking about what was going to happen there? What are your thoughts on that?
I did catch that rally. I'm not sure. That's a really interesting race, especially the Senate race that's going on with John Fetterman and Dr. Oz. I guess we'll see. I think the polls are showing that it's going to be really close. Obviously, Dr. Oz has been backed by Trump, so we'll see if that works out for him.
Yeah, it's interesting. Trump was hinting very strongly about running for president, and he plays this music, "Hang on, I'll be coming," and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then he says, I don't want to do that right now because, well, I'd like to, I really want to, but I'll have to wait and focus on this. So I think it's pretty well publicized that he is intending to declare for president sometime by the end of the month. It could be extended depending on how these elections draw out, because some of them are always contested and that kind of thing. But anyway, we'll see how that goes. He's got an enormous following. He's got $100 million war chest. But Governor Ron DeSantis is a serious threat. What do you think about Ron?
I really like Ron DeSantis, and I'd really like to see him run for president this go around. I'm not sure how that's going to look with him and Trump battling it out in the primaries. But if he does decide to make a run for 2024, it'll be really interesting to see. And I think we have two strong potential candidates for the general election, if it's either Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump. So all we can do is wait and see, I think.
Yeah, I think so. But we'll find out more about that very shortly. We've got a couple of races here in Virginia. We've got a race down in the Virginia Beach area, and that one is shaping up in a good way. We've got Yelsey Vega running against Spanberger here in the 7th district. She's looking pretty good. And Hung Cao, a Vietnamese immigrant guy who he's got a great ad that he puts on about how his family fled Vietnam after the communists, came to the United States, and he owes everything to America. Went to the Naval Academy, spent a career as a Navy SEAL, basically, and magnificent candidate. So that'll be interesting. It only requires the Republicans to flip 4 seats in order to control the House, and it's conceivable that 3 seats could flip just in Virginia alone, just a single state. What's your prognostication for the House races overall? Everybody's got to guess. What's yours?
I'm gonna predict that we flip the House and that we win 4 more seats in the House. I think voters and Americans are wanting candidates who are wanting to put America first, putting American values first, addressing inflation, addressing crime, immigration, protecting innocence and the youth in our education system. So I think those are big motivators tomorrow on election day. So I think that's going to push us over the line and flip the House.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it took the Republicans a while to sort of understand what the races were all about. And I've been telling candidates around Virginia, I said, look, I said there are three things. Just remember CIS. That's the acronym CIS: crime, inflation, schools. Those are the three things. And then you can integrate. When you're talking about crime, you're talking about the border. When you're talking about inflation, you can be talking about the border, because all of these foreigners that Biden is importing they're all being housed. None of them are in cardboard boxes on the streets. And how does that happen? Well, the federal government comes in and they buy up all of the cheap rental space. What happens to the people who live there? They go into cardboard boxes. So Americans go out on the streets in cardboard boxes so that foreign invaders can come from all around the planet, because they can make more money here, and they push Americans out of jobs. They push them out of their homes. So it all integrates. But I think for candidates to remember crime, inflation, schools, and I think too many. I listen to too many of the old bull Republicans, and they'll talk about crime and they'll talk about inflation, but they forget about schools. And I think part of it is that they don't have children in schools today, so it's not on their minds. But I tell you, it's on the minds of the voters, and it is a very big deal.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Governor Glenn Youngkin made that a major issue on his platform when he was running, and it paid off. I think it's in the minds of all Americans.
Yeah, it really is. So you think we're going to win the Senate also?
I'm hopeful. I'm cautiously optimistic. Again, I think the Democrat Party and especially candidates running on the Democrat platform, I think they made it very clear that Americans aren't first on their minds. I mean, we see that with the Ukrainian aid bill that was passed, with 44 billion and counting going overseas, not addressing any of the kitchen table issues that are really impacting people across the nation. And I think that's going to resonate with voters. And I think we're going to see a lot of people that have voted Democrat their whole life, that this election cycle, they're going to vote Republican, because something's got to change at some point.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. A lot of the polls they've been asking the question, well, here are the issues, which ones are important? And one of them is preserving democracy. For a Democrat, preserving democracy means throwing a lot of people into prison without bail, just pure political prisoners because they trespassed on the Capitol on January 6th. For people like us, when they say, well, do you believe that preserving democracy is important? Yeah, I really, really do. And I think democracy is tremendously under threat. But I think what does it bring to mind when somebody says, well, are you worried about the threat to democracy? What do you think about?
Well, it depends who's asking me. Democracy to me are free, fair elections, high election integrity, fairness in our elections, in summation. But I think when that's being used by the Democrat Party, I think it's honestly a tool of propaganda. They're trying to stir up hysterics and try to make people think that the Republicans want to take away your rights. They want to take away your democracy. They want to abolish America as we know it. And I think it's a tool to make people scared and vote out of fear. And I don't think it's going to work, but I think that's what they're trying to push right now.
Yeah, and it's one of the flaws in polling. If you ask a question that means different things to different people, the information is useless. How many people think that preserving democracy is extremely important? you're going to get conservative Republicans and you're going to get radical Democrats, and they're both going to say yes. Well, that doesn't tell you anything. It's interesting. The first thing you mentioned was fair elections with integrity. Now, we've got 2 Senate races that, to me, are extremely unpredictable because we don't know how many real people will vote versus how many paper people. And this is the race in Georgia, where Atlanta, Georgia was the epicenter of voter fraud. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, also another epicenter of voter fraud. And so it's really anybody's guess. I mean, you think about it, the idea that you could put up Dr. Oz, who is obviously very intelligent, very articulate, and you put him up against Fetterman, a fellow who lived off his parents until he was middle age, never held a job. He's got tattoos all over his body, and I understand that some of them are about prisoners, people who are in jail because they're murderers. And he said, he wants to cut the prison population by 1/3. That means 1/3 of all of the violent criminals who have been confined being released onto the streets of Pennsylvania and across America, for that matter. And of course, what does a murderer do for a living? He murders. What does a rapist do for a living? He rapes. What does a burglar do? He burgles. So the whole thing, I mean, the idea that in any rational culture you would have 2 people like that, and somebody like Fetterman, has a bizarre kind of a scary appearance. I don't know. I mean, it is a strange thing, but the voter fraud is that's a wild card. He can pull a joker out of the deck, and all of a sudden he becomes the governor of Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. Yeah, that race has been very interesting to watch for sure. I think at the end of the day, it just needs to come down to competency. I think that there are certain professions or certain fields where you have to have a certain skill level. You have to be able to operate at a certain capacity to get the job well and get it done well, excuse me. And I don't know. I don't know if the polls are correct. Pennsylvania is just weird to me, that race all around.
Yeah, it's kind of a split state, because if you get out into the West, I mean, those people are salt of the earth. That my dad grew up in New Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. My grandfather was a coal miner off and on, and these are the best people in the world. But then you go to Philadelphia, and I'm sure there's some great people in Philadelphia, but the paper people, the people who are manufactured on ballots that are hauled in by truckloads, those are not the kind of people we want voting in elections, because they're not real people. But there was something that was very interesting. The Democrats have relied on suburban women, and it's been a part of their base for some years, to where suburban white, typically college educated women, they weren't solid like the African American or some of the other, but they were strong for Democrats. And there's been just a stunning shift towards the Republican Party, a 27% shift toward Republicans among suburban white women. Now, what do you think as a suburban white woman? What do you think is is happening there?
Honestly, I think education is huge. I think a big sect of that demographic, they're mothers. And, we're seeing the slow infiltration of just absolutely radical ideas and curriculum into our school systems. And I think that that's resonating with mothers. They want to protect the innocence of their children for as long as possible, as they should. And I think also with the radicalization of our school system, we're seeing an erosion of parental rights. I think that's resonating with white suburban women as well. So I think it really surrounds children. And I mean, you can always look to inflation as well as a big issue because, when you go to the grocery store, everything is so much more expensive. When you have to fill up on your way to your child's soccer practice, it's way more expensive. So I think that those are big issues that are impacting that demographic for sure.
Yeah, it's a dramatic shift, and it's too much of a shift to be just sort of a polling quirk, that kind of thing. But I was talking with Governor Bob McDonnell, our former governor, wonderful, accomplished guy, and we had a long talk. And one of the things that he mentioned, he said, Dick, he said, I don't know why this is. He said, maybe it's just that Republicans don't like to answer polls as much. He says, I just really don't know. But he said throughout my career in politics, he said Republicans have always polled, they've underpolled. In other words, on the election day, he said they'll end up getting somewhere between 2 and I think he said 6 or 7% more in the real election than they did when they were polled. And if that happened, the results of this election could be very dramatic. I mean, that's a huge amount.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think also there's a healthy distrust amongst conservatives and people in the conservative movement of pollers, of giving your opinion, your political opinion, especially to strangers, and how that information is going to be used, especially in this age of cancel culture that we're trying to navigate and live in. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Conservative Party pulls out in dramatic numbers tomorrow.
Yeah, I guess that would be my guess if I had to, is that we're going to have quite a surprise with the election. One of the interesting gubernatorial elections is out in Arizona with Kari Lake. She's the Republican who's running against the Democrat Secretary of State Katie Hobbs. Have you been following Kari Lake at all?
I've been following her a little bit. I'm a very big fan of Kari Lake. I really respect her for how she's been handling press and the media. I think there was one clip I saw briefly. She was giving an interview to multiple media outlets, and she pulled out a stack of papers. Each one was a news article that was disproving all of the lies that were being peddled by left-leaning media outlets, and she presented the stack of papers to them to disprove the propaganda and the lies that they were trying to push about her. So I like how blunt she is. I like that she's unapologetic, and I like that she is a fierce advocate of conservative values. I think she's a really strong candidate.
Yeah, she is tremendous, and I read a diatribe by a Democrat. It was an editorial. I wish I had it here to credit her with her work. But anyway, this woman who wrote the article, she was just sort of seething at Republicans generally, but she singled her out, and she said a comment. I can't quote it, but basically it was that Kari Lake speaks with such a smooth, polished mannerism that she could basically, walk people off a cliff or something. Well, she said it in a much more nasty fashion, but she caused me to have to Google the particular word that she had, and I can't recall it right now, but it was a word for it's a word that means sort of a melodic, soothing tone, and it's certainly true. Kari Lake has she is just incredibly articulate, succinct, pleasant to listen to, and she has such a way of synthesizing complex issues and boiling them down to the essence. Do you think she would make a good vice presidential nominee?
I do. I think that's something she should definitely consider doing.
Yeah, we've got to be appealing to the young voters, not so much because they vote, but because what they do, those who are activists when they're young, they're going to continue on, and they'll be leaders in politics later. But you think she would have a good appeal to a lot of the younger voters?
I think so. And again, like I was kind of saying earlier, I think it's her mannerism is something that definitely wins over people. I just love how, again, I'll use the same word, unapologetic she is. And she says what she means, does what she means. And I think that's, as a young voter in that demographic, that's what won me over.
Yeah, it's an exciting race. Now, a race that it really hasn't gotten any attention until just recently, but up in New Hampshire, you have Senator Maggie Hassan, who is the incumbent Democrat, and she has been challenged by a Republican, a former general officer, I think, Don Bolduc. Very, very energetic, fired up fellow, and I think early in the race, I think Mitch McConnell may have pulled money out of the race, thinking that it wasn't going anywhere, and then at a certain point, other Republican organizations started dumping money in because Bolduc, his internal polling shows just a 2% split. And, going back to what Bob McDonnell said, 2 to 6 or 7% tends to be the increase in the vote over the polling. That would suggest that Bolduc might just pull that thing out.
Right. Now, I think that's a really exciting race to watch. Everyone's calling it a wild card race. Again, like, we'll see what happens. It's going to be very exciting, especially in a state like New Hampshire, to see how Bolduc does.
Yeah, they don't have much early voting there apparently, but traditionally, and I've read this over and over again after elections, people going through the polling parking lots will report that most of the cars there are from out of state. And it appears that it's a long Democrat tradition to drive across the border and vote in New Hampshire, even though you're not eligible to do it. But so we'll see. Always people listening to the national news would think that voter fraud is something that was novel to the election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, but we have a long storied history of voter fraud in this country. This goes back before any of us were born. So, but we'll see. It doesn't mean that voting is not extraordinarily important. And we can see where, where Republicans have pulled it off, they've managed to reinforce the integrity of the system, and they have made things work out. How about another interesting one is the governor's race in New York with the Democrat Kathy Hochul and Republican Lee Zeldin. What's your prognostication on that race?
The polls are showing that it's going to be really close, and that it might even be leaning a little bit in Hochul's favor. I think Lee Zeldin is a very strong candidate, especially in New York. In New York City, the crime is out of control. They've implemented policies with catch and release and things along those lines, and it's a big issue, and everyone's feeling it. You have people afraid to take the subway, and things along those lines. And I know that's just in New York City, not necessarily all of New York State, but it's something to consider. And especially with, I believe it was Lee Zeldin, he had shots fired into his home a couple of weeks ago from an altercation happening across the street. Crime is big in New York. So I think that that's something that he should definitely be campaigning on, speaking about to constituents. And we'll see how he does in the election.
Yeah, there are a lot of people going to be watching that. It is interesting. The Democrat, one of their strategies, they're really up against the wall strategically, but there's actually a denial about crime. They say, well, this is just hyperbole. Republicans are making something out of nothing. But night after night, we're watching not just reports, we're watching video of people being thrown onto the metro tracks just for fun, not because there's an altercation, but just for the heck of it. They put some old white man or some Asian kid, throw them onto the tracks just to see if the train will run them over or cut their legs off. And you're watching videos of gangs, these gangs coming out of the inner city, and they run in with sledgehammers and smash open the display cases in stores. That beat people up as they're doing it and steal things. And we've, of course, even going back to the later parts of Trump's time in office, where we had these massive BLM and Antifa inspired mobs who went out and they looted, they burned, they chased innocent people through the streets, beating them to within an inch of their life, killing some of them, I'm sure, and then assassinating police. Hundreds of police have been assassinated as an outgrowth of those Democrat and media-inspired riots within the inner cities. So part of it is to claim that there's really no crime. That it's sort of like some of these old retired generals were coming out making statements, and they'd say, well, the riots in D.C. that have just burned down the burned up St. John's Cathedral, didn't burn it down, but these are mostly peaceful people. Well, they never say that about Republicans. Oh, they're mostly peaceful. It's always, somebody did something. The whole world is all Republicans should be condemned and maybe thrown in jail. But they do that with crime. And there was someone who was on the other night, and she was saying that the Republicans have taught people this word inflation. I don't know. I don't know
I
if you-
saw that.
What did you think of that?
It's insane, and it's just the continuous gaslighting of American people, telling them their problems aren't real, they're not really experiencing what they are in their everyday lives, you know? Like you brought up inflation, President Joe Biden has been saying for a while, gas prices aren't up, prices are not rising. They're saying it again, like you said, with crime. Crime's not happening. Even things like the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. No, there's nothing happening there. There's no humanitarian crisis happening there. We got out. It's all fine. And you know, I think that's also something that's going to motivate people to go to the polls tomorrow. They're tired of being gaslit. They're tired of being told that they're not competent enough or intelligent enough to understand what's going on around them and what's going on in their everyday lives. Um, I think that's going to be a big motivator tomorrow.
I think so too. And you know, the idea that somehow Republicans are teaching people this strange exotic word, inflation. I don't
Right.
know. I mean, what an insult to anybody. I mean, I could be a homeless person and I would be insulted if somebody said, "Oh, you know, that guy, that addict living over there in the box, he's never heard this word inflation." You know,
Well,
I say,
I
"What
think
are you talking about? You know, I don't know inflation." No, I mean, it's bizarre. The condescension of these people, just amazing, isn't it?
it is. I think it's just further evidence of how they see average everyday Americans. They think that they're a part of an elitist class that knows better and that's going to, you know, help us out of our out of our state of incompetency. I don't know. It's offensive.
Well, I think we're going to find out very, very quickly. I'm sure that Caitlin would join me in urging everyone to get out and vote. Show the Democrats that we do understand. We have always known what inflation meant, and you know, do believe your eyes when you see people committing crimes every single night on television, because they are doing it. And so with that, we'll wrap it up, and we'll be back with you at 11 o'clock on Wednesday. I think Caitlin will be joining me for that also. And thank you very much for being with us, Caitlin.
Thank you for having me.